Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry that, I record these before the weekend, so you have them for Sunday, and then I miss that it's Memorial Day weekend or a special weekend that I don't wish you a happy weekend. But I did want to give you an update. We made an offer on a place. We really thought this was going to be the place and work, but that deal fell through. So we're still searching. We're not giving up. We want God's perfect place. We don't want to just grab something, make it work, and be sorry for it down the line. We don't know what obstacles will come down the line. But anyway, so I just want to give you a brief update. We're still on the hunt. That kind of reminds me of our sermon this morning. I shouldn't promote other people's books, but Peter Hathaway Capstick writes on Africa, and way back when I was a young man, I read these books, Death in the Silent Places, Death in the Dark Continent, and he had 5 other books, Man-Eaters, the Man-Eaters of Tsavo, that stopped the whole England effort of building a railroad across Africa. But this morning, I'm going to read you just a quick story. It seems like a lot of you have made comment that you like the stories, that you can relate to the stories. This is not a spiritual story. It's just for fun, okay? This is just for fun, just to get us started. Death in the Long Grass by Peter Hathaway Capstick. Here we go. Authorities have likened man-eating lions to homicidal maniacs among men. Indeed, there are apparently some lions that kill just for the heck of it. But the most common cause of man-eating in Africa is the obvious: hunger. If a lion is hungry enough, he will eat you, period. Consider the recent case in Wonky National Park, Rhodesia, of the lions that in 1972 gave 2 white families a night of indescribable horror. Here is a story as I obtained it from direct interview at the time. Len Harvey, a Rhodesian game warden, had recently been married and was honeymoon camping with his wife Jean at an old elephant control station near the Shapee Pan, as natural ponds and forages are called. At Shapee was another semi-vacationing ranger and his family, an experienced man named Willie DeBeer, his wife, daughter, and her husband, a student from Salisbury called Colin Matthews. In a 2-day period, 3 lions had become increasingly bold, even to the point of entering the camp and eating chickens belonging to the native staff. However, since they had attacked no one and were within the borders of the national park, nothing could be done despite their threatening behavior. The second night, firearms locked away in accordance with regulations designed to prevent their theft for guerrilla purposes, Len and Jean were asleep in a pole and mud hut. Slightly after 11 p.m., a large lioness leaps through the window of the hut, hurling Jean from her bed to the floor. Instantly, the lioness bit her through the small of the back and shook her like a terrier with a lamb chop. Shrieking with pain and terror, the woman struggled to escape. Shocked awake, Len Harvey realized what was happening, and with the incredible bravery of the desperate, he threw himself on the lioness barehanded, punching and clawing and scratching to make the big cat drop its wife. And it did. In one lightning movement, it flattened the man, driving long fangs deep into his shoulder. Still conscious, Len screamed for his wife to get out of the hut and run. She rolled under the bed and, hysterical with agony and fear, emerged from the far side of the hut near the door. Covered with gore from her wounds, she fled the black hut, but halfway to the De Beer house, she stopped, giving a desperate thought to helping her husband. As she neared the hut again with steel nerve, there was a scuffle of movement, and although she was a young woman who had never listened to anyone die, the sound that came through the darkness left no doubt that Len Harvey was beyond help. Banging on the De Beers' door, she poured out her story and collapsed. Willie awoke his son-in-law and sent him to start the small Honda generator while he went to the storeroom for the guns. In the light of the small plant, he grabbed a Model 70 Winchester and .375 H&H caliber and a Parker Hale .243, both bolt-action rifles, along with a handful of cartridges for each. Fumbling, he loaded them both, jacked around in each chamber. Locking the safety catches, he handed the .243 to Colin Matthews. As he came up, both men, still in their underwear, ran for the Harvey hut. The door was shut. De Beer looked the hut over carefully. Seeing and hearing nothing, he called Harvey's name softly. A deep, warning snarl cut the thin light of the naked bulb outside the hut, and De Beer cursed. Still inside, he edged up to the window, a small black orifice in the mud wall. The safety snicked off the .375 as the Rhodesian paused. What if Len wasn't dead but only unconscious? A blind shot might kill him. He would have to be able to see the lioness to risk a safe shot. Gritting his teeth, he eased his head into the window, catching a glimpse of Harvey's bloody legs in a thin bar of light. But he didn't see the paw stroke that tore through the skin of his forehead and grated on his skull bone. A sheet of blood burst into his eyes as he threw himself backward, gasping in pain. Most men who had just had their foreheads ripped open by a man-eating lion wouldn't be anxious for an encore performance. Willie De Beer wasn't most men. Directing Colin Matthews to rip his t-shirt into strips, he had the young man bind the wound to keep the blood out of his eyes. Shortening up on the rifle, he approached the window once more. Waves of agony made him gag and wobble, but he pushed the rifle barrel through the window again. This time, the lion was ready and waiting for him. He lashed out of the blackness and caught De Beer behind the head at the base of the skull, the 2-inch talons driving to the bone, like holding him like great fish hooks. The cat tried to drag him into the hut with her, but De Beer screamed, let the rifle fall through the window into the hut. Gripping the edges of the opening with both hands, he tried to push away. The lioness' breath gagged him as she tried to get his face into her mouth, but because a paw she was holding him with was in the way, she failed. The man-eater gave a terrific tug, and the claws ripped forward, tearing De Beer's scalp loose from the skull until it hung over his face like a dripping, hairy red beret. Do you guys want me to quit? Is this getting too graphic? Are there little kids listening? I can quit. No? Okay. I can't see your heads go, so here we go. The man fell backwards onto the ground, and the lioness immediately launched herself through the window after him, landing on his prostrate body. Although barely conscious, Willie De Beer had the presence of mind to try to cover his mutilated head with his hands, a feat he accomplished just as the man-eater grabbed his head in her jaws and started to drag him away. Perhaps covering his head was a conscious gesture, perhaps reflex. Whichever, it probably saved his life. As the lioness lay chewing on his head, she may have thought that the crushing sounds she heard beneath her teeth were the breaking of the skull bone instead of those of the man's hands and fingers. De Beer, completely blind and helpless, could only scream as the lioness ate him alive. 10 feet away, petrified with terror, Colin Matthews stood watching the cat ravage his father-in-law. In his white-knuckled fist was a 243 rifle, loaded with 400-grain soft-point slugs and a fifth in the chamber. Cullen could have easily shot the man-eater, but he did not. Never having fired a rifle before, he didn't know where the safety catch was, or even if there was one. As he fought with a little Parker Hale to make it fire, the incredible, unbelievable, unthinkable happened. Cullen Matthews put his foot into a galvanized bucket, hidden in the shadows, lost his balance, and fell, dropping the precious rifle. Always carry a pistol. Anyway, that's my addition. The lioness looked up, her bloody mouth twisted into a snarl. She had been too busy with Willie DeBeer to realize Matthew's presence, but suddenly dropped the ranger and with a hair-raising roar, charged the prostrate boy. Matthews was still struggling to remove the bucket from his foot when the lioness slammed into him. As if in a dream, he shoved his right arm as far as it would go into the enraged animal's mouth. The wood-rasped tongue tight in his fist. White flares of agony rocketed up his arms as the powerful teeth met against his bones, crushing them like pretzel sticks. Suddenly, the blind, semi-conscious DeBeer realized that the great weight was gone, that the lioness wasn't biting him anymore. As from a long distance, he could hear Cullen shrieking over his pain. He rolled over, face up on the dirt, listening to the lion chewing on the young man. Automatically, his crushed hands began to feel around for a weapon, anything. His broken fingers touched something hard. In a flash, he realized that it was the rifle barrel, the fallen 243. Ignoring the agony of broken bones, he tried to grasp it. It seemed stuck. It dawned on him that the lioness must be standing on the stalk. Somehow he tugged it free, the sudden release making him fall backwards. Awkwardly, he reversed the rifle, found the safety, and still unseeing, listened to determine where to fire. By the sounds, the lioness was standing over Cullen's body. He triggered the first shot, then as fast as his smashed hands could work, the bolt action fired twice more. Silence blanketed the camp. "Cullen, are you all right?" "Cullen." "Yes, Dad, I'm all right," answered a pain-tight voice. "But you shot my hand off." Before DeBeer could answer, Matthews gave another scream, which mixed with a grunt from the dying lioness. In her death throes, she had moved down the young man's body and in a final reflex bitten the kneecap completely off Cullen's leg. On DeBeer's legs and Matthew's eyes, they staggered back to the house where Mrs. DeBeer drove the 30 miles to main Camp Wonky for the Rhodesian Army helicopter that evacuated the victims at 5 the next morning. One more paragraph? Can you handle it? Okay. Rescuers found Len Harvey's body where it lay in the hut, partially eaten by the lioness. He was buried the next day. A post-mortem of the lioness revealed no reason for her attack beyond hunger. Her stomach contained a small snake, a wad of chicken feathers, and most of Len Harvey's face. The first shot fired by DeBeer had caught her in the lungs, the second in the shoulder, and the third, traveling at a muzzle velocity of 3,000 feet per second, pierced the cat's right cheek, completely smashed Cullen's hands and knuckles, which were inside the lion's mouth, and then passed harmlessly through the left cheek. An inch or so higher or lower would have broken either her upper or lower jaw and prevented her from snapping off Cullen's kneecap a few seconds later. Luck of the draw. Willie DeBeer surprisingly survived his wounds. He had 222 stitches in his head alone and immense skin and bone grafting, on both head and hands. 2 months later, his head was still swollen beyond recognizable features. And then it just goes on to say, he says, I have often wondered what became of the 2 other starving lions that were reported as accompanying the lioness that killed Lynn Harvey. They've not been heard from yet. Okay. I know you're wondering, what in the world can that have to do with Sunday morning? These were the books that I read as a young man. They helped form my personality. They were the things I was just interested in. So, here we go. In 1 Peter, we'll start in 1 Peter. Come on, open up here. 1 Peter, chapter 5. Right after he says in verse 7, cast all your anxiety on him, on Jesus, because he cares for you. He says this, be self-controlled and alert. Keep a cool head. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Hang on a second. In the Message Bible, it says, the devil is poised to pounce and would like nothing better than to catch you napping. In one of these other books, it talks about leopards, and it says those leopards would, with their claws, pin a man down on his back by the shoulders, and then with their hind feet be like a roto-rooter in their guts. Sounds like that might not be too deadly, but the infection that came from that really was. Okay, off of lions, jaguars, and leopards. The word says he prowls around looking. But in Fire Rock Church, he can't find anyone to devour. He might look scary, all poised to pounce, but he's a defeated foe. His teeth were pulled at the cross. He was declawed during the resurrection. All he can do now is roar. In staying in that chapter in verse 10, it says that he will himself restore you, make you strong, firm, and steadfast, because in the Message Bible, he has great plans for us in Christ. Eternal and glorious plans they are. And he gets the last word in our life, not the devil. No lions. Matter of fact, I got 4 verses here as support verses. I just want to read them to you. If you got a pen and paper, you can write down the reference and you can look them up for yourself. But in Colossians 2:15, it says, having disarmed the powers and authorities, triumphing over them at the cross. 1 John 3:8, for this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the work of the devil. Hebrews 2:14, through death Jesus might destroy him that had the power of death. Had the power of death. 1 John 5:4, and this is the victory that overcomes the world, even our faith, our belief. We're not victims anymore. We are victors. Let me just comment on this. It is only as we walk with God that we are trusted to steward greater measures of authority. You're not going to be given any more authority if you're going to run in fear. What the devil tries to do is keep you and I ignorant of what belongs to you, or distract you, hence roaring, snarling, drooling from his teeth. He tries to distract you from pursuing the presence of God so he can overstep that authority. As we come into a trusted walk with God, hold on, James 4. He says in James 4:7, submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come near to God and he will come near to you. And in verse 10, humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. Yell, now I'm in the Message Bible. I got to just keep going because it's really fun. Yell a loud no to the devil and watch him scamper. Run home to mama now. She's calling. Say a quiet yes to God and he'll be there in no time. Get serious about this. Really serious. The only leverage the enemy can use in overstepping God-given authority is ignorance. We learn to utilize the authority granted to us to enforce what belongs to us. In ignorance, when I fear, or you fear, I'm not all that God wanted me to become or be. Ignorance hinders my authority. Ignorance hinders my strength, my courage. In Psalms 91:13, I've read this before. It says, you'll tread on the lion. You will trample the great lion. And in the Message Bible, it says, you'll kick young lions from the path. You're going to walk right through that jungle because it has no dominance on you. You have dominance on it. And in 2 Samuel 23, it's only one verse. 2 Samuel, what did I say? 2 Samuel 23. I just want to show you that it's just one verse. 2 Samuel 23. It's talking about David's mighty men of valor, those he picked to run with him. All of these were valiant warriors. But it talks about Benaiah, valiant fighter, who performed great exploits in verse 20. He struck down 2 of Moab's best men. And then it says this, one sentence. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. I mean, there's a whole message just in that sentence, because Benaiah didn't see a man-eating lion. He didn't see the slippery slopes of not being able to run up and out of that pit. He saw a lion rug on his cabin floor. He saw something he could wrap up in the wintertime and stay warm. I love these stories of valiant men who did impossible feats, went against all odds. And you know, I want to tell you about a dream I had. I don't have very many dreams. There are men with the gifts of dreams, but when me and Bobby were first together and I was learning about her abuse, I was learning about her woundedness. Well, one night I had this dream, and it was the most real dream I ever had. I had two of them. This was the first. I had her around the shoulder, and I had her clutched to me. Back then, I shoot horses, and I was just pretty strong. Had faith in my ability to hang on and not let go. The devil comes out of this wall, and I never had a dream where I could smell his breath. I could feel the heat when he would roar at me, and that's what he was doing. He was roaring the most menacing, gruesome, drool dripping from his teeth, roaring in my face. And I didn't have a weapon. I had nothing. All I could do is roar back as loud as I could. And me and the devil were just roaring at each other. But he couldn't touch Bobby, and he couldn't touch me. All he could do was roar. I never forgot it, because I thought, how could I smell in a dream? How could I feel heat in a dream? But so when I woke up, Bobby's sitting up in bed, and she's staring at me with her eyes like this. And all I could say was I roaring? She said, yes, and you're scaring the hell out of me. And I said, well, I was pretty much scared too. But that dream convinced me that God wanted me to protect her. She was going to need supernatural protection. The reach of God's power is endless. There's nothing God cannot do, and there's nothing we cannot do when our faith is in Him and His Spirit indwells us. If you were to be asked beforehand, well, what would you do? You might not have an answer, but it'll come to you in the moment you need it. Excuse me just a minute. As long as I'm being excused just a minute. There is nowhere that our minds can't reach that God's power cannot reach. Let me read that again. There is nowhere that our minds can reach that God's power cannot reach. In Ephesians 3:20, he says, now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more, not little bitty more, immeasurably more than all we could ask or think or imagine, according to His power that's at work within us. I mean, if nothing else, roar back in the enemy's face. His breath might stink like sulfur, but you can handle that. It's one thing to understand and embrace God's power. It's a completely different story to know how to operate in it. So what would we call this? something 101, how to operate in it. Number one, roar. Learn to roar. Let's move from ignorance to lion killers. Man, since that time, since that dream, I had another dream. This time the devil didn't come like the devil. He came like a jaguar. It was just every bit as much real. But it was real to me after reading these books. Since then, Bobby's been involved in a few deliverances. Scary work. But there's no backup button in Bobby. No quit, no restart until old Toothless is gone. There's been times I've tried to pull Bobby back, like that person's gonna die. There is no pullback in her. When the Bible says resist him and he will flee. Run home to mama now, you thumb-sucking devil. In 1 Peter 5:13 in the Message, oh, I better get back there. What did I say? 1 Peter? 2 Peter, 1 Peter 4. Listen to this. He says, the church here in exile with me. I thought, that sounds like us. But not for a minute forgotten by God. We might not have found the perfect place yet, or the perfect place has found us, so we might feel in exile. And let me tell you, me and Bobby really do. We're working so hard, then we feel guilty that we're not corresponding with you. We really miss our Sunday mornings. Oh, we miss your fellowship, your laughter, your smiling faces, your hunger, your, there's so many, I could mention names that aren't sitting back just waiting for the next story. They're up engaged, and I love that. It says right after that, God gets the last word. Don't ever think the enemy, the devil's going to have the last word. His last word's a roar, and that doesn't hurt anyone. It says after that, in the NIV, he will restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. He gives a little warning about the devil, 1 or 2 sentences, but then he goes on in paragraphs to say who we are in him, the authority that we have in him. And at the end of this chapter, chapter 5, verse 14, it says, greet one another with a kiss of love. Now in our church, we were huggers. We definitely hugged. I didn't see too much kissing going on. It reminds me of Mary B. She was a 95-year-old lady that still had a lot of spirit. And it seemed like every Sunday, she'd try to put a lip lock on me. And I was pretty wise to her tricks. And so every time she would come up like to kiss me on the lips, she'd just get this far away, and I'd turn and she'd kiss me on the cheek. It was fun. In Romans 16:16, it says, greet one another with a holy kiss. I'm sure they're talking about the cheeks, even though it doesn't get real descriptive in that. But if you're in a home this morning, somebody opened their home to you and you're doing home church, or maybe you're just alone with your wife, greet each other with a holy kiss, and know this: you have the authority. O Toothless has no authority over you. So the story was just a pump primer, but my goal is to show you who you are, the strength that you have, and to know we so miss you. We miss you. We love you. Hang on one second. So, Father, everyone listening to this, I'm speaking out that you'll erase ignorance from our lives. Erase the devil's roaring distractions. We're getting a lot of that right now. Negative. We want your power, your strength, your wisdom, your revelations, even inspirations of how we should be thinking, how we should be moving ahead. And for all our people that we love dearly, protect them. Put a hedge of protection around their lives, around their marriages, around their families, their homes. Your word says, as we flee the devil, you will come to us. So that's what we're asking for. Continue to grow us. And let us feel each other's love, even though we might be scattered, even though we might be in exile. Let us feel each other's love and support in this time of separation. In the name of Jesus, amen. Thank you all for tuning in every Sunday morning. We love you. Don't forget that. It doesn't change. If anything, it just grows and grows. Bye-bye. I mean, adios. You know, I've never been really good at closing, so we're closed.